Boy, there's definitely going to be a few panels to censor in this read-through, aren't there? Welcome back, everybody. Unless this is your first time here, then welcome. This is a really strange place to start. But we're going to start right where we left off last week. But real quick before we do that, as always, I want to thank my patrons. Thank you guys so very much for supporting me. And yes, absolutely, there is going to have to be an uncensored version of this one up on Patreon because, good Lord. Anyway, here we go. Nikaido is in En's mansion. And if you thought that after the last volume there was going to be some type of, big showdown between Nikaido and En or something like that, yeah, that doesn't happen. En and the big mushroom monster pretty much have her tied up immediately. And jump over to Noi, and she's got Shin's dog, and she's going to go out looking for Shin. And since when does Shin have a dog? Since right now, apparently. Also, they pretty much find Shin immediately. So, like any tension from the end of the last volume, I don't know why I expect things to happen, differently or dramatically. Like, he was missing at the end of the last volume, and in this one, he's just there on the ground in his bag. Whatever. But anyway, now that everybody's back together, En's going to introduce his new partner, Nikaido. And they're going to have a ceremony to make their partnership official. But before we can have the ceremony, they need to be purified. In other words, they're going to take a bath. And in a different manga, Berserk, I criticized it for using a bath scene that I felt was out of place. And particularly in that manga, it felt out of place. In this one, on the other hand, it does not. It feels exactly like something that would happen in this world that has been built for us. And at the same time, this is by far the most shameless nude scene that we have been given yet in this manga. Anyway, moving right along to the actual ceremony. Now, this ceremony requires them to literally open up the person's chest and place the contract directly inside of their body. En and Nikaido and Shin and Noi all exchange contracts. And actually, Ibisu asked Fujita if he would be her partner, and he said yes, and they're supposed to exchange contracts too, but Ibisu is missing because she ate rotten meat or something and is not feeling well, and she misses the ceremony. So I guess poor Fujita at this point. Now flash forward a couple of days, and we're following the bird-headed gimp guy. What's his name? Churta. God. Where you at, buddy? We're following Chota, and he's all bummed that he's not going to be En's partner anymore. But he's still going to go to the mansion, and he's still going to suck up to En, basically. And when he gets there, there's going to be a dead guy outside laying in the yard, and he's asked if he can investigate and figure out exactly what happened to this person here. So now we have a murder mystery whodunit on our hands, which pretty much just ends up being a whole bunch of silliness that culminates in En was drunk, and he's the one who did it. He's the one who killed the guy. Meanwhile, we get to see inside of the holding cells where Nikaido and the other people are, and Nikaido's in one by herself, and all the other people are in the other one. Basically, that professor number 13, whoever the fuck that is, and Johnson. Anyway, the professor and crew are in one of the cells, and they're all being tortured for information that they don't have, and Nikaido is one cell over, and she's being held until the contract fully takes hold. So in my mind at this point, I'm thinking, well, maybe there's still time to do something before it takes hold. We'll see. Stick around. We'll find out. Now switch to Caiman, and he's still having some nightmares. And actually, in all seriousness, I really enjoy the nightmare scenes with Caiman. They have just enough. They're just weird enough and just creepy enough that it's a nice break from the comedy, and you actually feel a little off-put and maybe even unsettled by some of the nightmare scenes, and I really do like them. But anyway, Caiman's boss is going to figure out that Caiman's looking for the guy who put the spell on him, and he's immediately going to decide to help him. And then that leads to him finding out that Caiman's looking for the Cross-Eyed Gang, to which he knows a member of the Cross Eyes, and guess what? He's on death row, and he's getting ready to be killed, and he has requested a meat pie from Caiman's boss for his last dinner. So guess what? So let's go talk to the death row cross-eyed guy. How convenient. This whole manga is built off the back of everything happens very conveniently, and there's no stakes or tension. With that through line of comedy, which is phenomenal, by the way, and just really carries this whole thing along. If it weren't for that, I would probably say this was not a good manga. But that is so good that at this point I have no complaints. Like I said, if it weren't for that comedy, though, I would probably be nothing but complaints. Anyway, now we're in the prison. And first and foremost, this guy looks terrible. And secondly, Kaiman sticks his head in his mouth and he says, "You are not the one." But here's where it gets interesting, because the guy then looks at the head inside of Kaiman's mouth and recognizes him as Risu. And then says, "But Risu's dead." But that's literally all we get before this guy is immediately killed by devils. So they go ahead and they leave the prison, but they take the guy's severed arms with them because on his palms there was a tattoo of a person's face, and that person's face had cross eyes. So we'll just take his severed arms with us. Now back at Ends, they finally bring Nikaido out, and they give her a new costume, while the professor and gang make a break for it and are caught by Shin and Noi. But Shin immediately recognizes the professor as the guy who saved his life, fixed his smoke, and put him back together. So he basically takes the whole gang under his wing and won't let anybody hurt him, and he starts protecting them. Goes so far as to hide them from N and put them up basically in his room or wherever. Now, Nikaido is going to watch a self-made propaganda movie made by N about N. which it runs pretty much exactly like you would expect a movie made by N about N to play. But anyway, it starts with him killing his parents as an infant when he was born. Then he's taken and raised in a smoke factory. Then he goes down to hell and has to survive hell by himself for several years before going back up to the smoke factory. It's quite ridiculous. At some point, he ends up wearing like this tiger stripe suit. I mean, it's completely bonkers. But anyway, in the second half, it gets into a particular cross-eyed guy who's running around cutting off people's heads. He's also completely overpowered to the point where when Shin and Noi go to take him on, he completely fucks up Shin and Noi, and N ends up having to turn the whole place into a giant mushroom field just to take this guy out. But right as he does this, N also sees a headless man disappear through a door, pretty much just how Caiman was found. So we have a lot of information here. And first off, we have to take this information with a grain of salt, because remember, this is a propaganda movie made by N. But at this point, we're getting a lot of conflicting information. The Cross-Eyes boss appears to be all-powerful. He also appears to possibly be Caiman. Caiman also appears to possibly be Risu, and Risu is not all-powerful. Risu's an idiot. So somehow, Caiman simultaneously is Risu, but he's also the boss, but he's also, I don't know. All I'm saying is that right now it doesn't add up right. Now, Caiman and his friends are going to infiltrate N's mansion under the guise of selling meat pies. Actually, they really are going to sell meat pies, but at the same time, Caiman's also going to try and locate Nikaido so he can rescue her. And since the people at N's mansion know what Caiman looks like, well, he'll have to go in disguise then as the boss's new wife, a girl with a pie for a head named Pie Man, because Caiman's smart. Also, this ends up being an even better disguise when they run into another meat pie vendor who's also an ex-employee of the boss's, who also is a girl who also was basically infatuated with the boss. So now she is going to immediately be at odds at the boss's new wife, Caiman. Anyway, leaving that behind, now over at Shin and Noise, we see the professor and the crew are all hiding out. And what the fuck is this guy doing here? I mean, this motherfucker's dead. I watched him melt 2 volumes ago. I had to stop right here. I'm like, this book is lost his goddamn mind because I watched this motherfucker melt. Now, I went back And I found that exact scene where he melts. And apparently, like 2 pages later, you see the professor dive down and pick up a little mushroom and go, "Ooh, doctor." So you're telling me that he picked up this little mushroom and he carried this thing around through several worlds and prison cells and torture chambers to the point where now he just poofed back to reality, I'm assuming because of Noi, off screen when no one was looking, and now he's just chilling on a couch and we're just supposed to accept this like it's totally fine and normal and natural for him to just be there. I'm sorry. I know I've joked multiple times about how this manga has literally no stakes and no tension. And I actually accepted that this guy actually melted from an attack 2 volumes ago. Now he's back with literally no consequences. This is the most egregious example of this manga having literally no stakes or tension yet. I know that it's about comedy, and I know the whole thing is a comedy, and it's not to be taken seriously, obviously. But this has gotten to the point where I forgive like 99% of this, but this has actually gotten to the point where it's going to become a slight complaint. And if it continues, then I might complain more down the road. And it's not a big complaint, it's just a real minor one, but I would like at least a little bit of cause and consequence and a little bit more substance, a little bit more tension, and a little bit more, sometimes stuff actually happens that actually matters down the road. And so far, that A, hasn't happened, and B, this is telling me that, boy, we can stretch the complete lack of consequences so far that I don't know how we're coming back from any of this, at least as far as adding any level of real cause and consequence back into the manga. But anyway, like I said, it's not a big complaint, it's just a little complaint, but I think it's actually finally evolved into a legitimate complaint. But not a big one. But anyway, now we're going to have Caiman and the boss and his ex-girlfriend, and they're all going to go have some shenanigans and some gather ingredients, and they're going to have baked pies, and they're going to have a big pie bake-off, and there will be a winner and a loser, and it's a whole large section of just a bunch of shenanigans, and it's just a bunch of good genuine fun. And of course the boss wins. But during all of this, Kaiman's going to see Nikaido, and he's going to go chase her, and he's going to try and pull her off to the side. This, in turn, is going to turn into a large fight between Caiman and Nikaido, because Nikaido is now fully under the control of this contract. Didn't get out of it, by the way. And they're going to go at it. And this is a good fight scene, just because I like Caiman and Nikaido so much, and it's just fun to watch them kind of go at it, even though nothing's going to really come of it. Anyway, they go running into a building and fall through a floor. She fucks up Caiman's leg, and then she gets stabbed in the back by a mysterious hand that comes out of a puddle, exposing the contract inside of her. When suddenly her devil friend from before shows up and pulls the contract out of her real quick, but he also warns her that if she comes in contact with N, it'll regrow inside of her, and she'll be back under his control again. So then he sends her and Kaiman away to try and keep them as far away from N as possible, keep them safe. Also, meanwhile, in all of this, Chato, was that his name? Chodo? Is it Chato? Choda follows them, and he sees everything that was going down, but the devil then transforms him into looking exactly like Nikaido and enlists him to help them get away by going back to N and pretending to be Nikaido. And of course, Choda is all on board, because that means he gets to pretend to be Nikaido, and he gets to pretend to be N's partner, which is exactly what Choda wants to be. So he's all like, oh yeah, I can do that. But then for a split second, right when he turns him into Nikaido, of course he's wearing the same clothes that Choda was wearing, which of course leads to 2 or 3 pages of just the most over-the-top fan service that this manga has given yet. And I know I already said that once in this exact video. Also, real quick, Kaiman puts Nikaido's head inside of his mouth now that he can't deny that she's a sorcerer anymore. And the head inside of his mouth says, "You aren't the one." But now Nikaido has gotten a chance to see the head inside of Caiman's head, and she even says, "That's Risu." Now, speaking of Risu, he's over on the other side of the world running into the Cross-Eyed Gang's inner circle, the boss's inner circle. You know, that big, powerful, crazy, powerful guy from that video, you know, that propaganda video we just watched. Also back at Shin and Noi's, Shin tells the professor that him and his crew's going to have to go back to the hole and they're leaving tomorrow or something. Then Shin and Noi leave. So the professor gathers up his people and they immediately leave because they're going to go get a message to Kaiman, and they're going to do that getting in touch with the professor's wife, who he hasn't spoken to in 20 years, but she's also a sorcerer and she lives out in the forest. It really doesn't make sense, so don't try and make it make sense. But anyway, they head to the forest. Meanwhile, Shin and Noi are talking to En, and En tells Shin and Noi that the super powerful leader of the Cross-Eyes, that guy from the video, he's in hiding out in the forest somewhere. See where this is going yet? Anyway, out in the forest, the professor and the rest of the group run into a cabin. And in that cabin, they get jumped by the Cross-Eyed Gang. And I thought for a second that this was where Risu was in that group of Cross-Eyes. But these guys don't look like those guys. These guys look like a bunch of zombie Frankenstein-looking motherfuckers. So this clearly isn't the same place. But don't worry, because Johnson's going to run in and he's going to save the day. Have I told you before how much I love Johnson? At least for a while he's going to save the day, because eventually they're going to chase him off with a can of bug spray, which is hilarious because that is a complaint that I had about another manga, this time Uzumaki, that I thought was just kind of silly and out of place. And once again, it is implemented here perfectly, and it feels right at home in this manga. So twice now in this read through that's happened to me. Go figure. Anyway, right then, Shin and Noi show up to the fight, and for just a split second, it's super glorious, until Noi gets taken out. And Shin gets there, and they threaten to kill Noi unless he drops his hammer. So he does, and then they take him down. And then they run away with Noi. Just for Shin to get back up and pick his hammer back up. The end. And let me tell you, I'm looking forward to wherever the fuck Shin goes with that hammer next. Because, yeah, he don't play. And they've got his friend, so he's really not going to play. I have a feeling this is going to be wonderful. But I say that every time, and sometimes that doesn't work out for me, so we'll see. And let's be fair, I have some minor complaints here and there as this goes on. But all in all, I'm having just a really good time with it. It's a lot of good, dumb fun. I think that's a really fitting way of summing it up. And I really like Shin and Noi, and I really like Shin and Noi running around with the professor. I really like the professor. I caught myself on this read through when I was reading the professor. I was like, I think he's one of my favorite characters. And then I got to thinking about it. I was like, wait, I've said Ibisu is my favorite character. I've said Shin is my favorite character. And I was thinking to myself this time that the professor is my favorite character. I have a lot of favorite characters, apparently, which is good. It means I'm really thoroughly enjoying the characters and the people that are rolling through the story as we go. I'm having a wonderful time with it. That's not to say that it's perfect, and that's not to say that some of the things that happen kind of, I wish it would be done a little bit differently. But other than that, I mean, I'm having just a blast. I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give this particular section, I think we'll call it an 8. I don't know what I don't even remember what I gave the last one, to be quite honest. But at this point, 8 or an 8.5. How much fun did I have with this? 8 or an 8.5? We'll say, I'll think about it while I'm editing, and whatever pops up at the end is what I decided. Anyway, as always, the links for both my Discord and my Patreon are in the description below. And thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you next time.